Cedar Falls has a community solar program that is going bonkers. But also a special mention that the CEEE that Tom Hill runs started the program in many ways. Green Iowa AmeriCorps is managed out of CEEE at UNI. Yes, and we've had the privilege, of course, to have a team here. This is our 6th year now, and it's just been a tremendous part of the work that we do and the community work in much of the state. So without further ado, Tom.
All right. Wow, it's so wonderful to be here. About the familiar faces, I see some of the former staff member at AmeriCorps, former leadership at AmeriCorps members. Good morning, all. And new friends over the years. You know, I love coming to Decorah. And when Andy said you guys have a breakfast and talk about energy, it's rare really to have a gathering of people who are interested in energy as an important topic of our nation. So really delighted to be here. It's really amazing the work that the Winneshiek Energy District has done over the years to focus on, again, energy as a fundamental community infrastructure. So glad to be here. So I thought I'll start a little bit before talking about this particular community solar. Maybe I'll start talking about the kind of the importance of local government and local ownership of kind of decision making, particularly in a time when people always badmouth government as being effective, etc. I think my experience, I've worked as a city council member in Cedar Falls for 8 years, and it was the work making of the community, making just the daily life of the community happen. You know how they say unions, the people who brought you the weekend, you know, have you heard of that? The people who brought you the weekend? Well, City Hall is, or local governments, county schools, is the people who bring you everything else. Like the streets, the sewer, the water, you know, all the basic thing that makes everyday life possible in the community happens because we organize ourselves in a way to make that happen. That's really incredible. And and it became really clear to me in those 8 years I served in City Hall of the day-to-day, what all the just a variety of detailed work that had to happen every day to make the city work. You know, so in that context. Obviously, the energy infrastructure is one of those things. Well, it's not one, it's the fundamental, it feeds everything else, right? It's the scaffolding that holds everything else up. In our town, so I want to kind of talk a little bit about kind of history of Cedar Falls municipal utility. And right now, in Cedar Falls, I just get one bill that has our water, our sewer, electric, gas, cable, all of those. I just got one bill. Has all of those. It's all coordinated. What's that?
Big your bill is?
Well, I know. Yeah, I mean, I know my electric bill. All the others are, boy, you know, there's internet and there is, you know, yeah, sewer, water. I have to I think our electric is maybe 300 to 400 kilowatt hours a month. Anyways, up until I think Cedar Falls utilities began maybe in the 30s, but in the 50s is when, and it was all part of the city. But in the 50s, the city decided to separate the Cedar Falls utilities from City Council. It just was part of the City Council. Now they're on the wrong board. So Cedar Falls Utilities has its own board appointed by the mayor, approved by city council. But they're totally independent. They have their own board meeting, they do their own finances, but they are kind of the baby of the city. So if something goes fundamentally wrong with finances, then the city is kind of responsible. But you know, that has never happened. I mean, they've been very responsible and they've been doing their own work. So kind of structurally, as a board, they run the show. And there's a general manager just like any other utilities. And so they, city's water, sewer, all those operations, they're still under the city, but the billing is done with Cedar Falls Utilities. Cedar Falls Utilities does, again, they've gotten into cable, they've been obviously into the power business, you know, coal and natural gas for a long time, but they've gotten into, over the maybe last 20 years, they've gotten into cable and internet, and now actually recently they're starting a landline, kind of a phone landline, which is basically internet based. So they're trying to get people to sign up with them. So that's kind of a little background of our utilities. They have a huge kind of social capital. People just love them. Everybody just loves the Cedar Falls Utilities because of really what distinguishes them from what they call the power of service, that they're there. You can actually call and talk to somebody and they'll come to your house and fix it, and whatever it is. Particularly with gas and electric, you know, I mean anything, if you just call them, regardless of whose appliance it is, who it is, if you smell gas, you just call them and they'll be there within minutes. And anything to do with gas, they'll be there, really with anything else. Their trucks are all over the place, so they're very well known, very well respected, and just anything really they ask for, people support. And let's see, and they were kind of early on, Waverly Utilities were the same, they're also municipally owned. They invested in wind, Cedar Falls invested in wind. You know, they bought several wind machines. So they've been, again, it has always been a small percentage of the total power. That's been my complaint. You know, that is why are we kind of on the small spectrum, but a small portion? Why aren't we going bigger and bigger? Let's see, what else can I say? So with the solar, by the way, just my interaction with the staff, I know some of the key staff at the Cedar Falls Utilities, because when we started the AmeriCorps program, they were the first kind of sponsors, you know, because we had to raise local money as well as grants to run the AmeriCorps program, and they were a key partner, and so I've gotten to know them over the years. And the solar, I've always been encouraging them to do solar, renewable, do more wind, more solar, and 1 year was maybe 3 years ago, I got a van and I invited several of the staff, key staff engineers at Cedar Falls Utilities to go with us to see the farmers co-op in Kelowna, so that they could see there was a utility, their colleagues, that they were running this solar operation. And we went, took notes, and then they said, okay, we'll get back with you. And then a few years later, they thought of this idea of, well, I guess they saw how other communities were doing it. They said, sure, we can do it. And they came up with this idea of simple solar, that you would buy a few panels per family or per business, and then you would get credit. I'll tell you a little bit details about that. But my first reaction was, well, so Cedar Falls right now, most of their electricity comes from a giant coal plant in Council Bluff. And they have a share, they've purchased a share of that plant. But they never sent out a note to everybody saying, okay, we're buying a share of that plant, how many shares do you want, right? When it was coal power generation, we never said, okay, this is a coal garden. We're gonna buy a share, and it's gonna be great, But when it comes to solar, all of a sudden there is, well, everybody should. So I questioned them. I said, well, why don't you just do it as part of what you normally do, right? They said, oh, well, if we did that, it would never take off because our board we have a kind of a very strict formula for the payback and stuff like that. And if we just followed that, this would just never fly. And of course, as we all know, those equations don't count a whole lot of costs, right? Those costs, return on investment type of thing. When the cost of coal is very, very, very cheap, then it'll never pay back, right? So that's, I've always told them that that's not, but that's most of the reason the Cedar Falls utilities, as Andy has been saying, at least we have a local, it's kind of like City Hall. It can be as great as it can be, or it can make really bad decisions, right? It's us. It's up to us to make them make good decisions, right? We're going to push them. And in Cedar Falls, people haven't really engaged the Cedar Falls utilities. All of the initiative has really come from a few staff. It hasn't been like, wow, people attending the board meeting and saying, well, we really want renewable energy. So this has been interesting because they proposed this idea of simple solar. They said, well, people just buy panels, and all of a sudden the response was just overwhelming. It was supposed to be a really small thing, and they got so many people wanting to buy. The size of project kept growing. It kept growing, and so now they finally are in the construction phase. I think it's almost done actually, and it's 1.5 megawatts, and it's about 6,500 panels, and everybody initially they estimate, because they assumed it's going to be smaller. It was going to cost people about $400 a panel, and now per panel cost is $270, and they're going to subtract it from your annual monthly bill.
And that drop in prices is from just prices falling as well as scale?
Just more scale. They increased it, and many more people bought it. You and I bought 1,800 panels, so about maybe a third. So let's see. And so the way they're going to work it, because I signed, I bought a few panels, and so that I see how everything works out. And basically what they're going to do, because on a monthly basis, they know the output of the panels. So they know per panel how many kilowatt hours were generated, and then they're going to basically give you credit. They're not going to just subtract that kilowatt hour from your normal kilowatt hour that you used. What they're going to do is, that's what they told me, they're going to refund you, kind of credit you based on what they call avoided cost for them. Okay, so they don't have to buy X amount of electricity at wholesale. Well, first of all, they give you wholesale prices, the prices that they would buy electricity. They told me several costs. One was the basically price of wholesale plus what they call capacity value. It just means some, the amount of fee that you have to pay to reserve certain amount of power in the grid that you're going to use. So there's basically a number of fees that are avoided, and they're going to credit you every month. So
that's much less than that meter.
That's probably less than net metering. Yeah, I mean, I wish they would just say, okay, it's easy, kilowatt hours. We know how many panels you had, kilowatt hours minus your kilowatt hours used, that's your credit, but I think they're doing, it's gonna be a little less than net metering, probably. You know, it'll be interesting how that would work out, yes.
But usage is based on brackets, and the more you use, the higher the per unit cost becomes. Where are they gonna peg this in?
Okay, they told me, see, I asked them these questions, they said it's a very complicated formula. In terms of how it works with the places they're buying power from, and I don't know how that works. But they've come up with this formula that it'll be interesting how it works out in the end. But it has been great in that quite a few people have pitched in, you know, and so actually it's going, and well, as you know, nationally there was a whole concern over, you know, if everybody did their own solar, who's going to pay for the grid, right? You know that. So there's discussion of that, and probably they have been thinking about it and saying, well, how are we going to maintain our crew and the lines, power lines? There's a lot of infrastructure to take care of. So that's probably, again, I don't know all the details of that, but all I know is that that's how they're planning to do that. Plus, they're working on the state production tax credit, and they said if they get that, they're going to pass it on to everyone. So if they get any kind of freebies because they're producing renewables, they're going to pass it on to everybody. So it's kind of again, I see it as a good start, and we'll see, you know, how things move forward, and how many more people would want to participate. So right now, so here is the downfall. That's where I think it's not a downfall. It's just it says something about, to me, it says something about where we need to spend more of our creativity. Is that this 1.5 megawatt of electric power generation comes to less than roughly about 0.5% of cities' electrical use per year. So you could say, yes, this is a good beginning, but that's it, really, good beginning. And we really have a lot of work to do, not just increasing the solar production, but really reducing consumption. So that's the part that nobody really talks about. You know, yes, Cedar Falls Utilities has a great, conservation program. Again, they fund it with AmeriCorps. They have very, very good rebate program for appliances and things like that. But they have almost no program to reach out to businesses. They're a big chunk of, electrical consumption. The rates currently, are they're very backwards. The more you use, the cheaper it gets.
Yeah.
Okay. Now Waverly, the city of Waverly has their inverted rate. So the more you use, the more expensive it gets, but not by much. Just the slope of that inverted rate is very, very small. And so I keep, again, so our problem is not the Cedar Falls utility, it's just that people aren't as engaged. And we need to start doing what you're doing in Cedar Falls to build a constituency around these issues. I really feel like we really don't have that much time, right? I mean, and I keep thinking, well, what does this Paris Agreement mean? What does it mean in Cedar Falls, in Decorah, right, in Waverly? What does it mean in Iowa? So what? They signed an agreement. In the end, the action has to happen where we live, and we have to do it. We can't just say, well, whenever, they'll tell us what we have to do, right? No, we have to figure out how to do this about in 35 years, right? It's a pretty steep steep road, and we need to figure out how we're going to significantly reduce demand and produce more renewables. So those are the questions I keep thinking. How do we do that? And obviously, having a locally owned utility is wonderful. Yes, I mean the service is incredible, really incredible. Next door, Waterloo is Mid-American. All we hear is complaint.
So I think feel free to jump in with questions.
Yeah.
Do you have
Questions, thoughts?
Well, you answered one of them. When are you going online? Or when does it start?
I think we're going online really within a couple of months. They're pretty close. Pretty close.
And you mentioned avoided cost, just a quick note on that, because there are a lot of energy geeks in the room here.
Yes.
But Cedar Falls, they're not really just paying avoided cost, they're stacking that. So they're
Yes,
sort of trying to get at a value of solar rate, which is really where the national conversation is going, not just net metering, but at some point we're going beyond net metering. We want to protect it for a while, but we do need to disclose these value of solar rates, which are different for different utilities. So their value of solar that they define only includes certain pieces. It may not be as good as as customers would like, but it is more than just the avoided cost. It's more than the 4 cents. It's going to be somewhere, maybe around 8 or 7 or 8, maybe.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to see.
Nobody knows.
I'd like to after several months and see what it'll be.
And there is one pending bill in the legislature, I'm not sure where it's gone in the funnel or going right now, but that would essentially authorize every utility in the state, especially the consumer-owned utilities, to pursue the development of a value of solar rate that then would get approved by the get submitted to and approved by the utilities board. So it would start this process, which would be really interesting if it's actually done by each of the 150 consumers here in the state or something. I'm not sure how that would work, but that's part of the political discussion right now.
Is this a corporate investor that's providing the funds to get the tax credits?
They did put the whole construction of that for a bid, and I'm just trying to think whether Cedar Falls Utilities qualify, whether they're kind of a are they considered a nonprofit, and they had to use a third-party, investor or not. I know there's a guy who teaches at Hawkeye Community College who's part of this bigger national solar company, and he won the bid. So he's the one. His outfit is the ones who are building the place, and I'm pretty sure there is a third-party agreement. And this, by the way, is for 20 years. So this $270 per panel. For 20 years, every month, you'll receive and then after 20 years, that's it, you're done. I don't know what happens after that. It's like, by then, we'll have hopefully we'll have a lot of other projects going, other solar power, that utility would invest in.
How does that transfer if you move out of the city then?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. That's really part of what they made this whole thing simple, was that they would just buy out your share. Yeah, so if you move out of town, no problem. So you're not stuck like if you had invested in it on your own home, and then you were kind of stuck still paying for that and stuff like that. That's what they took care of that. That's right. They'll just buy it from you and sell it to someone. There's a waiting list already. There's a waiting list because they want to finish this first phase. They still have some more land to install more. So that's.
And they're putting it on city land.
Yeah, it's on public land. It's kind of a place that is just it's kind of it's hard to explain it, but it's a place that there was really no use for it. It's kind of near a lake in a holes dug, kind of sand pit to build a road, kind of near an industrial park, and it was just near some bike trails and stuff, so they just put it all there. They just looked around, found places, that was a kind of a good sized place to place it.
So it's, you talk about individuals, businesses, and then specifically city buildings, library, they, how do they purchase?
That's interesting. Whether the city, I think the city may have purchased some too.
Okay.
I don't know. I know UNI has. I mean, so UNI would be a form of, kind of a state entity, state government. And then you would think the city, yeah, they pay for the light. There's a lot of utility bills to pay. So you would think they would maybe. I'm pretty sure. Actually, I know they purchased. I don't know how many. And I remember there was like, I read it in the paper, and the city council voted for it. Almost, I think there was maybe one person who did, everybody else did. Yeah.
And that is a nonprofit.
Yeah. There's,
None is a nonprofit.
yeah. I mean, it goes to invest in the infrastructure of the utility. That's why our prices are kind of pretty low. Yeah. It's owned by the people of Cedar Falls.
Can people net meter in Cedar Falls?
Yes.
So
Those who have individual, those who have individual panels on their home. Yeah.
So that will continue.
Yeah. And they haven't, Cedar Falls Utilities hasn't really publicized that a lot. But people who have installed solar on their homes, they have made those arrangements with Cedar Falls Utilities, and I'm pretty sure it's a net metering system.
I wonder if the utility would sponsor a program to assist homeowners in putting up their own under the same kind of framework.
That's the thing. All along, up until Simple Solar, I've been trying to encourage utilities to do that, and to publicize the state and federal tax credits. They haven't really done that. I really don't know why. Because we were pushing, solar hot water, because we had a local plumber who had installed quite a few, and we said, well, why wouldn't the Cedar Falls Utilities support that? The only thing they offered, and again, they didn't publicize that, was just no interest loans. So we installed our solar hot water heater. I didn't have any upfront cost. Every month I paid it through my utility bills. But yeah, they never publicized those things, and I was really puzzled as to why they wouldn't.
Well, it reduces their sales, which is the revenue they use to pay their employees and to maintain their system. So every utility is faced with that challenge. It's just interesting that here you have a public utility that's
I know, yeah.
supposed to be serving the interests of the public, and yet, but it has to at the same time be cost-effective service.
But in general, right now, I really don't think the Cedar Falls Utilities has, I guess my complaint was that they really didn't have a staff who was totally on top of everything renewable. They didn't have kind of the staff capacity to be really on top of things. I think they're beginning to maybe a little bit, but I keep telling them, well, there's this conference, there's that conference, there's colleagues, they're there, we should be there, So I'm not sure, I think they're better now. I've heard that they've encouraged some of their board members to attend some national conferences and stuff like that. So that's, to me, I've always thought that's the best way to kind of change the culture of the organization, is to for them to see that they're not alone, there are other of their colleagues around the nation doing this sort of thing,
So a quick follow-up question. Do you know whether Cedar Falls Utilities has been participating in the distributed generation docket in the Iowa Utilities Board? And the reason I ask is because if you have been, and because it is a public utility, the utility would definitely make a significant contribution to the conversation if it were to submit into the docket the methodology by which they're arriving at their rate. It would demonstrate how a utility is calculating a version of value of solar. And that concept has been kicked around in the docket, and some of us have pointed to the Minnesota model. But to have something coming right out of Iowa would be, I think, helpful in that docket. And so, I mean, it would take me long to kind of search through that thing and see if Cedar Falls' name comes up.
Okay.
But if not, you might encourage the director to submit something. I mean, I would assume that because it's publicly owned, that what is it I'm looking for? The formula here is not proprietary and is actually, should be publicly available. And so, you know, not only should it be shared obviously with folks in Cedar Falls, but I think it would really help if it were in the docket so the rest of us could take a look at it.
So I'm just trying to wrap my brain around the financial payback on this system. So it's a 1.5 megawatt system, say roughly 6,500 watt module, or 6,500 modules.
Yes.
So that equals about 230 watts per module. $270 each to buy in. The tax credit is taken by the investor up front, not the investor buying at $270 per panel. And then we don't know what the value of the energy is. You say avoided cost, are we talking 4 cents, 5 cents?
Yeah,
And
it's not clear, but what they have said is that they estimate based on the average home and stuff like that, the payback would be about 15 years to average home. But that really depends on, yeah.
so are they building an escalator into that avoided cost? Or is that not determined yet? To me, it just seems like it would be hard to buy in if you don't have those numbers put in front of you.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's been a lot of goodwill saying, wow, this is good, let's do it.
Right.
I get some of my electricity from the co-op in Cresco, the rural co-op. Their things are simpler. You can readily see how long it's going to take you to get payback. It's a long time, but it's very simple. It's net meters and so on. So occasionally, on the one hand, it's easy to see, and oh man, didn't have to do this. But if they had a higher upfront cost to do it. So sometime I'm interested in this concept of rate that you're talking about, Andy.
And the value of solar rate, and you mentioned conferences, I should mention too, before people start to go, the Energy District, first of all, is working on 5 solar workshops that will be happening between February 25 and March 10th, one in each county around Winneshiek. So if you're at all interested in learning more about solar, go to the website, energydistrict.org, and you can find the page for energydistrict.org/solar. You can find those workshops, but also there is an Iowa Solar Conference coming up here, March 24th, I believe. It's 2-day, but that's the main day of the conference. It's down Cedar Rapids at Kirkwood Center. And a number of COUs, RECs, and munis are involved in that. And value of solar rates are a key part of that discussion because it's happening here in Iowa. So again, that's a statewide. Aaron from CFU is going to come down and talk on one of our panels. So, so that's a great opportunity as well. Just want to mention that.
No, that's great.
For those of us who don't understand, can you say a little bit more about what is included in the value of solar, that idea?
Right, the value of solar idea, and Minnesota is the closest example of this. They went through a distributed generation docket essentially came about. The utility said we don't want a net meter like has happened in many states. And the response in Minnesota was many advocates came together and their utilities commission approved a process that said, okay, net metering is an approximation, it's a rough guesstimate for what solar people should get paid. So let's actually put some finer points on that and look at what are all the values of solar to the grid that a utility should pay their customer if you build and install solar and connect it to the grid. And so then they start identifying all the different pieces. So the value of the energy that the utility buys from the big grid is one of them. The value to the peak power times, because they pay more, the utilities pay more for energy during the late afternoon sunshine when you're producing power. The transmission losses that do not then occur for getting power from Lansing or wind farm somewhere else all the way to your house, that's an added value of solar. The frequency or voltage regulation that has to happen on a grid when you've got big flows from one place to another, that's another value. And they started to identify all these and stack them together to figure out what is a just rate that you should be paid when you're putting solar onto the grid in those times when you're overproducing and not using it on your side of the meter. And the big question, of course, is that more or less than the retail rate you pay, which is what net metering pays you, because that just gives you credits one-to-one. Minnesota's value of solar rate, they went through a year-long process, everybody was involved, ended up coming out a little higher than the retail rate. And that's actually what's happened in most studies around the country that have done this. So what the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission did is they said, okay, utilities, you can choose. You can either pay your customers the value of solar as it's defined, or you can net meter. So far, no utility in Minnesota has decided to pay the value of solar rate. But this is something, you know, that community programs are facing too. It's a great idea, and the concept of not having to interconnect all these and not having to maintain them and having the portability. But most community solar programs are coming out with something that is less than the retail rate net metering when you buy in. And that's essentially what you're talking. It's not just avoided cost. It's somewhere between avoided cost and the retail rate that comes out as your deal.
So Cedar Falls Utility, so this is an interesting thing. Because whenever I brought up the idea of why don't we charge more for large residential users, I didn't even go to manufacturers, but residential users, why is that in a part of town, my community, anytime you go there, it's like Christmas, you know, all the lights are on, outside, trees, you know, and these guys, they use 8 times. I actually asked the Cedar Falls utility to give me their utility without adding